Alrighty, first and foremost, and I just want to say this from the bottom of my heart. I'm beyond committed to your success, my friend. I appreciate you committing to yourself and to your own success, and want you to know I'm just as committed to yours. So I want to take the time today to dive into, get to know you a little bit. Give me a little bit of a background history about your few years here in real estate. Let me know what it's been like, and then let's dive into some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now, so we can work on overcoming them today on this call.
Yeah, so pretty much I've been unofficially in real estate for I think 3 or 4 years. I've been fully licensed for the last two. I got my full broker's license this year. I was a PB last year, provisional broker. North Carolina is a broker only state. I started out with Sands Investment Group. They're a pretty decently sized commercial real estate brokerage here in the Southeast. It wasn't a good culture fit, so now I'm at SVN Blackstream. Over the last few years, I haven't really closed anything. It was a tough market. And now I'm in a position where I should have close to $2 million of transactions. If everything goes and I get the PSAs, I'm supposed to get them tomorrow. That's kind of where I'm at right now. My biggest kind of hiccup in this business is prospecting and actually like getting people who are willing to meet with me and set up appointments and all of that stuff. And B, honestly, it's just, trying to get more consistent, like prospecting, get to that 300 to 1,000 calls a day that you were talking about in the CRE club.
So, and again, I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So, one of which is prospecting in this, in the sense of actually the activity of doing it and getting to the certain level of calls, conversations, leads. And the other one is the quality of the data. Let's talk about first the activity. So, what is because that boils down to probably your scheduling, right? More likely than not. What does your schedule look like right now?
Since I started this new gig and I started the CRE club, I've been trying to be pretty consistent with keeping hours. I try to get into the office no later than like 9:15, 9:30. Once I'm there, I try to solidly prospect until I get to go home because my pipeline isn't at a place where, I can just stop. What I've been doing for the last couple days since I just got in here was I've been calling, until around now, 5 or 6 o'clock. And then, I go home. And I have a few off-market opportunities from doing that.
Let's quickly break down what you mean by that. So, do you have a dialer or do you hand dial all day?
I have a dialer. So I used to hand dial, but then I saw your mastermind and then I got Mojo the next day.
I mean, the last few days that you've been doing this consistently, how many calls a day are you making?
Yesterday, I hit 80 calls. Today, I wasn't really as active because my boss had me shadowing him and following him around. Well, I'm my managing director. But, usually, and back when I was at Sands, like the company standard was 100 calls a day. Usually, that's where I like to be. Oftentimes, though, when I would get people on the phone, they would tell me things like, oh, due to where interest rates are, or, our transaction volumes were really low right now. We have to bring this to our investment committee, and then they bring it to the investment committee. It's like, oh, we don't like this.
Sure.
All this other kind of thing.
I'm going to break each piece of this down. And I think that let's get super clear though. If you're dialing from 9:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a lot of time, and you're using a dialer, you should be somewhere in the vicinity of 600 to 1,000 calls in an 8-hour period.
When I do the Mojo dialing thing, it has this thing called Call Hammer, and I'm pulling all of my list off CREsync. So sometimes it's like 9 or 10 numbers in that Call Hammer. You know what I mean?
No, that
so I'm
makes
sure
sense.
my dials is like a lot more than like
Yeah, I'm just
how
curious what
many
your
it's
dials were, right? Because I can understand that. I am curious because I think it should track both. Anyways, I just would be curious what that is, but I understand. So because the challenge though is that if you're only dialing, let's just say 80 different properties, right? And even if you had an unbelievable pickup ratio of 20%, right? That means you're only speaking to 16 people in 8 hours, which is 2 people an hour. I would recommend, and right now you're paying for CREsync, or is that part of your company?
So I was paying for CREsync, but now I moved over here that they said that they get CREsync for us free once we get a listing and they give us CoStar for free just because.
I would even try to say that like maybe they can give you Reonomy for free if you instead of CREsync and try to work that in. Just because CREsync I think also only gives you what 500 exports.
Yeah.
Reonomy is 1,000 per month. So I think that, it's a little bit better in that retrospect. Don't get me wrong, both Reonomy and CREsync both give you quite a number of different contacts per record, right? Per address, you're going to get a number of phone numbers for them, right? Each one of those times, like we use Reonomy, right? We export somewhere between 20 and 50,000 numbers a month. I just want to figure
Mhm.
out the best way, because I want to talk about the data in a minute. I just, if you're actually prospecting every single day or even every day, 3 hours a day at a minimum, which is typically what I recommend, you should be somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 30 conversations in 3 hours.
And I'm not getting those type of results. So I'm trying to figure out like how can I, get my my list, I guess, more dialed in. Because that's really where it comes from, right? This is like the quality of the list you're pulling.
So look, I mean, again, we use Reonomy. I've had great success with it. Do I think it's perfect? No. Do I think CoStar is also okay? Nothing. I don't believe any software has perfect data. I've yet to find it, and if anybody ever finds it, I would love to hear from it. But we've been using Reonomy with pretty decent success. So I'd probably recommend trying to get your office to at least get one Reonomy account,
Mhm.
so that you can work on that. It's not incredibly expensive. I typically can get a 15% off discount for anybody for like $339 a month total for 1,000 exports. So it's not terrible. So I would definitely work on doing that. And then because if you could use Reonomy and prospect every day for 8 hours, even 4 or 6 hours, you're going to definitely see probably twice the contact ratio. And especially at the beginning of your career, I don't believe there's really anything else I would really worry too much about other than making your prospecting calls, building up a basis of off-market properties of individuals like you were mentioning who are looking to sell, and then the individuals who are saying they're not interested in selling, learning the pivot strategy appropriately, which we talk about a lot, which is pivoting then to then seeing if they're a buyer, because you could be building your off-market seller lead basis as well as your buyer business, right? You can, a bunch of buyer leads. So and trying to do that for 90 days straight and just stay super dedicated to generating those types of leads. Because the only other thing that I would really recommend in your next 90 days, just to start giving you the highest likelihood of getting a contract ASAP, how many different deals are you pitching on a weekly basis? Right? Like how many times are you calling up a buyer and saying, hey, I see a property here at 123 Main Street, or I have a property here at 123 Main Street, and go through it with them and try to get an offer on that property? How often are you doing that?
So let me give you a little bit more background. Before I came to SVN Blackstream and after I left Sands Investment Group, which is the two commercial brokerages, I hopped to two residentials. So before then, like, I wasn't really doing that because the guy over there, he had like a specific selling system that he wanted me to follow, and it didn't
Yeah.
really work out too well. But now that I'm here and like this is like my first real week of actually getting to, I can't really give you that number yet.
Sure.
But when I do get on the phone with people and I'm able to have conversations and then saying like, yeah, I'm not interested, I'm like, well, I know you own this property at 123 Main Street. I see that at the warehouse or land, whatever it is, I have some off-market similar properties to that. Like, would you be interested in hearing what I have to offer?
Mhm.
And usually they say like yes, and then we kind of go back and forth, but I still can't get that traction.
What I have found is that typically there is a phase where it's rare on the very first phone call where you're doing your pivot, right? Where you go into a buyer conversation. They're interested in possibly buying some property similar to what you're probably prospecting for. And then you pitch them a deal and then they make an offer on that deal, right? It's rare that you're going to do that all in one phone call. Has it happened? Sure, but is it likely? No. Or do you have any people in a buyer pool, a lead list that you have any type of true relationship with that buy more than one property per year?
Yeah, so while I was at Sands, they really made me focus on prospecting for capital groups. So like I am like, pretty cool with a few different family office managers here in like the local Charlotte MSA.
So then, do you have an exact idea of what they're looking for?
So actually I could pull that up right here. So these guys generally look for anywhere between 1 and $10 million industrial buildings. They're looking for minimum 8 caps. They like flex industrial and retail. And that's pretty much all of the people that I have.
Take this as an example. Do you prospect for that individual client, or are you prospecting a random list that you pull?
So I prospect the way I do is like I'll do anywhere from 5 to 20,000 square feet industrial warehouses with loan dates that are 2 years away from maturity. So that's how I'm pulling. I'm not necessarily pulling specifically for like his name's Nick. So I'm not necessarily pulling specifically for Nick, like this is what he's buying for. But what I am doing is like, okay, look, this is something that I know that Nick might be interested, and this is also like a long enough list where I can make my rounds throughout the day calling. If I
How
get
many
an off
properties
market
are on
here,
that
then I'll need
list?
to pitch. The stuff with Nick, maybe 5,000, but they're all over the country. Those ones specifically in North Carolina, I think, are like 800, 900.
So just in North
And
Carolina.
these capital groups, they buy all over the Sun Belt.
Yeah, so I'm saying let's just say Carolina, right? Like, you know, in your
Yeah.
market, right? In your market, do you say there's 8 or 900 of those properties in your market specifically? So, because what I
Because
would
they
do
cover
is
the
that
whole
I would
state.
get, yeah, I would get an exact, yeah, throughout the whole state. So I would highly recommend that you pull a list of exactly what they're looking for, like a Nick list as an example, right? Like a list that you know that if you found something on this list, he would most likely be your buyer or 100% be the buyer, obviously, if the price is right. What this allows now is every time you get a lead, you should be presenting that lead now to Nick almost every day, right? Because you shouldn't be going a day without generating a lead. And you should be basically in communication to the extent where you're having a conversation with Nick almost on a very, very regular basis of all the leads that you have. I have 3 guys that I talk to every single day of my new stuff. I'm trying to get an offer every single day, a legitimate offer every single day on something. That's not including, like, obviously, like I make starter offers that are in my name on properties as an investor. So I generate a lead hypothetically, just like you would from prospecting for Nick. Then you could make an offer in your own name, or I would make it in my own name. And then my intention is every single day, I want to then take that deal and then bring it to my buyer, like you bringing it to Nick and saying, hey, at what price can you make sense of making an offer at? And doing this every single day. Because like the minimum metrics we try to look at on my team, which we try to keep it incredibly simplistic, and I'm not talking just specifically about calls, I'm not specifically talking about conversations in this for just a quick moment. If I'm just saying, let's just move your business forward, generate 1 new lead every day at a bare minimum, and get 1 true offer every single day. Look, it could take you 600 calls or it could take you 10 calls, but the point is we want 1 good lead a day, and we want to get 1 true offer from a legitimate buyer on a property every day. Because that will allow us to have, because let's think about it, like if you're working Monday through Friday, that's 20 offers a month. You're probably going to get 1 or 2 of those accepted. And obviously, if you're only doing 1 lead a day, maybe you do 2, and maybe if you get, instead of 1 offer, you get 2 offers a day. I mean, there's an incredibly high ability. You're enhancing your probability so much that it's very hard to not get a deal in contract every month.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're saying that you're making the offer, right? Obviously you're a lot more well capitalized than I am because I'm just starting out of my career and everything. Should I be firing off these offers to this guy's, like, for example, I have a dude, he wants it's an off-market deal here in Lexington, North Carolina, 7.7 acres, 560,000. It's well and septic, right? And general commercial zoning,
How
right?
big is the property?
So 7.7 acres.
The building. How big is the building?
It's just land, no
Oh, it's
building.
just land. Okay. What do
Yeah,
you
so
think
it's
the
just
land's
land.
worth?
So, given the comparables, Lexington, it's a smaller market for sure. I think it's anywhere between 10 and 30,000 an acre.
Okay.
Because there's no like city water and sewer there, it's probably closer to that 10 to 20,000 an acre.
Got it. So he has 7 acres times 10,000 is 104. Is 70,000.
Yeah, but he's charging 560, which doesn't make sense.
So here's the interesting thing. What I would do is that I would just, in your own name, which, by the way, like, no one's saying that you have to close on the deal, and you can talk to your attorney about this, but letters of intent are worth as much as basically this Post-it note here. They're not
Yeah.
worth much, right? Just keep that in mind, that you could submit a letter of intent for $70,000 on that property. And that individual, unless they apparently know something that we don't, is probably not motivated. Because if someone's asking for something in the vicinity of 8 times the value,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
it doesn't make any sense. Exactly. So it's like those types of deals will come across your desk very frequently. And it's the ability to say, I'm not going to waste my time and, remove that from the things that you're working on as fast as possible. So you can take all of that energy and effort and focus and put it onto a deal that might make more sense, right? Because
Makes sense. Yeah.
trying to convince this individual that his property's worth 70,000 instead of 560 or whatever he's asking is going to be an uphill battle. And it's, the odds of him taking 15% of what he wants is rare. I want to keep covering all these small things. So one thing is, like, listen, the prospecting all day, I think you're right on the money with that. I probably would just shift it where the time frame of 2 to 4, I would try to be pitching deals the entirety of that time, right? So from 9:30 a.m. till 2 o'clock or 1:30, you're just prospecting. Take a 30-minute break, eat, do your emails, check on your deals, whatever, make sure things are moving along. And then from 2 to 4 o'clock, all you should be doing for 2 hours is trying to get an offer on some deal you have. Because if you get
Whether
to
it's
5,
off-market or
5:30,
on-market.
because think about it, if you get to 5 or 5:30, 6 o'clock, whenever you're about to leave your office, and you don't have a lead generated today, and you have no offers written, true offers written from a buyer, are you moving your business forward? You should have just taken the day off, right? So those are the 2 main drivers So, because it's not about
Okay.
how many listings you have, out there, right? Because you could have 100 listings of awesome properties, but if you don't get any offers, right, whatsoever on those properties, it means nothing. Other than your schedule, which we kind of covered and have a decent idea on, and the quality of the leads, which I definitely highly recommend trying to get access to Reonomy. What other challenges or obstacles are you finding right now in your business?
I think the other thing too is just like, pulling those lists of people that are like buyers. And I think the way that I was trained on it and like approaching it was wrong. Cause like back at Sands, they were like, okay, you're gonna have to go find the top 100 buyers in your market, pull everyone who's buying deals recently, and then kind of call through that list and establish your buyer database that way. But
Okay.
I feel like your pivot strategy is a lot more effective in doing so because it's like, okay, we're having a conversation about selling, but if you're not interested in selling, you can always just pivot to buying.
So I think it's actually both. I think both are incredibly lucrative because if you come into this industry and say I have no buyers, right? Like if I'm starting over today and I have no buyers and I'm in a random market and I want to go generate some buyer leads, I would definitely, because you can do it on Reonomy, you can do it on CoStar, right? There's several different places where you can pull that lead list of all the top buyers in a marketplace and go through that list. Pull the list. You can pull all the last 12 months worth of transactions, right? Like all the properties that traded in the last 12 months, right above a certain price point within a certain market of any type of asset class, and you can see who has purchased those properties or who is the most active purchaser in the last 12 months, because that's a really good piece of information to know. Because if they're buying properties right now when interest rates are this high, they're probably also going to be continuously looking for more properties as the years go on. I think that's definitely a good place to start. The challenging thing that people also forget is that it's a both, right? Like it's like you have to be prospecting for sellers, because just because you have a bunch of buyers, like I have people come to me and like, oh, I have these hedge funds that are looking to spend $1 billion. What product do you have to sell them?
And I was in that same boat when I first started because I was calling BlackRock, I was calling AIC, I was calling Phoenix Investors, WP Carey, all these big guys. And it's like, dude, I just got my license a few months ago. What the hell am I going to give these guys?
Yeah,
Right?
like exactly, right? So it's really cool to say you have BlackRock and all these huge companies, right? Like I've met many brokers who say things like that to me, and I'm working with all these hedge funds and all this stuff, and they're looking to place billions of dollars of capital, and you get all starry-eyed. And then my next question is like, what leads have you generated to provide, to give to them? And then they have nothing. So what I have found is that I like to be we could do a lot of volume in the middle ground, right? In the 2 to 20 million, the 2 to 50 million range. And that, at least that's my market in Jersey. And that's pretty similar for the Florida market we're dealing with as well, right? For my team. I like to be in that middle ground where like there is so many buyers for those types of products, where the guy John down the street who has 4 buildings in the local market, right, and has bought a bunch of properties over the past, maybe last 2 or 3 years, they bought a few properties, right? Like that individual I'm not going to say competes with Blackstone by any means, but there's probably 50 Johns versus one Blackstone. And Blackstone doesn't give a crap about about a $4 million building in the middle of some random area, right? But you're going to find 6 or 10 buyers who might, versus Blackstone is going to be looking at a 4 million square foot portfolio of industrial properties, right? Meeting
All
with
Amazon
Prologis.
distribution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it's like how many buyers are really fighting over that one piece of. I mean, you might have 2 or 3 guys who can be able to complete that transaction. I like to be in the middle ground. Like where's the biggest piece of the pie like the biggest piece of the market, right? If the market is a pie, what piece of that market do I have the highest percentage likelihood of capturing? So it's like what's your market right now?
Charlotte. So technically all over North Carolina, but I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
All right, let's do some due diligence real quick. All right, we take North Carolina. And then do you have a specific asset class you like to target?
Yeah, I like to do industrial and multifamily, and in industrial sometimes self-storage blends into, so I prospect on that as well.
So let's dive into that, right? So if you go to industrial, I'm just going to click all of it. I mean, obviously there's a multitude of different facets here, but I'm just going to hit apply. If you see, what I like to look at is the following, right? Not only is there like, let's just say nearly 51,000, call it 50,000 properties to be prospecting on in the entirety of North Carolina, the more important piece to look at is we're going to go to sales. We're going to go within the last 5 years. Okay. And the reason why we look at this number is you got 14,000 properties have traded in the last 5 years, right? If we go to 10, right, you have 22,362, which means if you take this number and move a comma, that means each year on average over the last 10 years, 2,236 properties have traded, which means of the entirety of the market, we'll remove that of the 51,000. We're talking about 4-ish% of the market. So 4% of this market trades every single year on average. Now, if you look at the last 12 months, what are we at? which is actually isn't that crazy with interest rates as high as they are? It's actually above average over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
So now what we can see is like, okay, let's check the last 90 days in your market. You're still on track, right? 556 times 4, you're around that ballpark, right? And obviously it's probably going to be hotter during the summertime, spring markets, fall, winters are obviously a little slow. You're right on track. That's all great news in the industrial market. But what I'd like to focus on here is saying like, okay, let's go into, watch this, right? So on Reonomy, you can do this. You can go to owners. There's this owner tab here. And under owners, similar to like you were mentioning of the people who buy the most property, this will give you, this is going to be a very long list, so give it a moment to load, but this will give you a lot of really, really good data around who the top investors are in your market. Obviously, you're going to see, local governments, you're going to see Blackstone, you're going to see a multitude of other investors. But let me see if I can actually just move it real quick. Let's just do person, includes a phone number, 27,000 owners. So this is going to be ones that include a phone number. You can see the last acquisition date, which we can even change. You can see that all the individuals, what their names are, how many properties they have in their portfolio, how many properties they have in their search, which means just really they own an industrial property. This is how many they actually own. So like as an example, this person, like Dominic, owns 32 properties, but only 54 of them are industrial. So you can actually look into this and you can play around with, the data here where you can even see like, oh, okay, wow, these individuals have bought properties as recent as, let's see, last year, right? Obviously you can go through this entire list, last acquisition date, I'll sort by that. You can start ripping through a lot of these, some of these guys own $1 billion plus worth of real estate. This will kind of give you an idea and a good place to start to reach out to these individuals. They'll be great buyers for you to play around with. The big thing I like to mention, though, is one piece of this is that these individuals, as much as they might be fantastic buyers, they're probably the opposite of what it would be for a good seller. This is not somebody that you're going to be able to give Mark a phone call or any one of these guys a phone call, and then you're going to be able to become the listing agent of one of their properties, right? They probably know 100 brokers. What I would try to do is say like, okay, well, these might, the top 100 on this list might be a fantastic person to connect with as a buyer, but then you can basically flip it on its head and be like, okay, who owns the least amount of properties in this list? And then I want to reach out to these individuals, the lowest portfolio assessed value, right? Yeah. So like all of these individuals who own one property with 0 assessed values, these are going to be people who might be a really good option for you to be connecting with, especially if the last acquisition date was like 2013, where you can actually go through all this. And that's actually part of the sort here, which is like, okay, properties in their portfolio, you can do like 5 maximum assessed value. You can do something like maybe 10 million, I don't know, let's do maybe $3 million. So now you hit apply, it'll resort this all of this. So like this will only pull up all the individuals who are in that list, where you could start combing through this and trying to find the key people. That would be good for your top 100 buyers.
I see Reonomy is a lot better than CoStar.
I love the software. It's honestly, I think it's a lot better. And the cool part also, like I was even mentioning, is that if you go through industrial person in North Carolina, I should probably just delete this one because you can have some. The point is like what a lot of people do, right? Is like, okay, in all of North Carolina, like we were mentioning, it's like 51,000. It'll clear. So you have 51,000 properties in the whole state. Like if you just went to, let's just say Charlotte. Just in Charlotte, North Carolina, industrial-wise, you have 4,670 properties. And if you look at what is sold in the last 12 months, there's only been 212 properties that have traded in the last 12 months. In the last 10 years, there's been 2,133 properties that have traded, which means 213 properties trade every single year, which is exactly on par, which is kind of funny. Every market does that.
You got this down to a science.
What's interesting, though, is like, okay, the reason why, and like we were just talking about this, if you just called in Charlotte, you're only going to get a piece of 212 sales a year, which is just sometimes not enough, because it's like, okay, well, if you as a broker are going to take any type, even getting 1% market share, dude, is 2 properties. That's 1%, which is wild, right? And it's like, okay, well, and that's at a high likelihood, right? So it's like, okay, if you knocked it out of the park and you got maybe 3% market share, that's 6 sales a year, which is why I'm saying I like to always play in like statewide versus, citywide. Because it's like
I had watched
1,000 properties. You have way higher. You have 10 times the ability to close transactions.
And then you had said that in your conversation with Bob Knackle, because you guys were talking about how he was like, I like to prospect only in Manhattan. I'm very, very specific, very niche down. And you were like, well, I like to go bigger because if I have more properties to work with, then that means I can do more transactions. More transactions is more money.
Yeah, and also like I think about it like this, right? Manhattan has the most properties per square foot or whatever you want to call it per square mile of anywhere in the country. It's very hard to say that, if you're going to prospect in Manhattan, you have 2,000 transactions a year, right? Something like that, right? If I remember correctly, I think he said there was 2,000 sales a year. 2,000 sales a year is almost everything that occurs in the industrial market in itself in the entire state of North Carolina. There's a lot of bandwidth in that market share. In some markets, right, in the greater Miami area, in the greater LA area, where like you have sometimes thousands of transactions in a county, you have the ability to sometimes be able to take some market share, which, at 1 or 2% is still 20 or 30 or 40 transactions. Like in Manhattan, of 2,000 transactions, you get 2% market share. That's 40 sales a year. That is doable for a broker. That is doable if you're a top agent in that area. So it's just, when you have that kind of market share, or a market capacity, sure, you can just focus on Manhattan. But in the state of New Jersey, right, if I go to New Jersey, it's the same thing as the Carolinas.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with the New Jersey market. My cousins are brokers in New York and New Jersey, and all my family lives in New Jersey.
So
It's a lot more dense than it is down here.
Yeah. So it's like the same kind of concept, right? So it's like if I look at like all of the sales in the state of New Jersey in the industrial market alone, like in the last 12 months, it was only 793, 800 sales in the
1%
entire
is
state.
almost 8 properties.
That's ridiculous in the entire state. That's why it's like, okay, I can't survive on just calling industrial properties, right? Like my goal, income goals, I could never survive on 800. I have to, that's why we also like, besides expanding geographically, right? Like that's why we also expand into retail. That's why we also expand to self-storage. That's why we also expand to multifamily and all these other asset classes where now it's like, all of a sudden you can build it up to, having the ability to close. If I close on 2 or 3% market share, that's 60 to 90 sales a year. Unlike, if you're just going to focus on one city in New Jersey where, there was 11 sales in the last 12 months of every asset class. How on planet Earth do you survive?
It's like prospecting industrial in New Brunswick, right? There's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do. Exactly. So what else can I answer for you, my friend, to make sure this is super valuable?
Honestly, Henry, it's been incredibly valuable. I feel like you've distilled over a decade's worth of experience into a 30-minute phone call. So I'm really, really appreciative of that. I would just ask, if there was something that I had to do, like, you mentioned the 90 days kind of time frame. Besides, prospecting, getting Reonomy, getting a tighter list, using the pivot strategy more. What are some actionable steps that I could take in order to, kind of put my best foot forward and, get a little bit more strides this year?
Let's break this down into a really, really simple, actionable things right now. For the next essentially 90 days, realize that just sort of like I mentioned before, the only things that truly matter is generating off-market sales, which is generating good leads, good properties that are at a relatively decent price. So generating more leads, which means basically being on the phone for at minimum whatever amount of time it takes in order to generate more leads. Some days it might be 2 or 3 hours, and some days it might be 6, 7, or 8. But the agent, like think about the most valuable piece, most valuable action a commercial real estate agent can be doing in the business. What is it? Finding what?
Finding leads, finding opportunities.
Yeah, good deals. Finding good deals. If you're a broker who finds the most good deals in your marketplace, not only will you make decent money, if not the most money in your marketplace, you will probably never have financial troubles. It will be rare for it to occur, right? If you are constantly the source of the most good off-market deals, you will constantly be making money, right? You probably won't have so many financial troubles. So unlike competition, right? So keep that in mind. If that is truly, hands down, the most valuable activity that any broker can be doing, right? Or really any investor, any broker, anybody in the commercial real estate space, the most valuable activity is finding great off-market deals. If that is the case, a large percentage of your time should be spent on sourcing that. And if you're not sourcing that, outside of that activity, every moment that you're not working on that, which is probably hands down, in my opinion, the most valuable. So 80% of your time should be focused on that. The remaining 20% of your time should be what?
I'm actually not sure.
So I would recommend it being anything and everything that has to do with getting a contract on those properties, sourcing buyers, and connections for buyers, pitching those deals to buyers, writing up letters of intent. Those three activities, which is generating the buyers, pitching the deals to them, and writing up drafting letters of intent, is really, it's like that married with sourcing great off-market deals is a unbelievably simplistic way of saying it's really hard to make money or not make money in this industry. So it's like all day long, all I'm spending my personal time doing is generating opportunities and then selling those opportunities. I'm doing the same thing. Now, I also might be the buyer in some instances, but like all I'm doing is sourcing deals, selling deals, sourcing deals, selling deals. That's this game. If you're working on the sourcing side and you don't have any right now to pitch, that means you spend more time on the sourcing. It's like you have to have enough stuff to constantly be pitching stuff out. Because if you look at your inventory, right, your off-market inventory list, and you've got nothing, you should be spending the entirety of today or this week or this month filling that that inventory. Because if you think about it, like what does an investor want? Think about it. Whether it's Blackstone or John from down the street who's got a couple $1 million in the bank, what do they want?
They want profit. They want to make money, right?
They want to make money. Exactly. So if you find deals in which they can make money, you will make money every single time, right? So if, again, boiling it down to the two simplicities of this industry, right? It's becoming the source, right, Matt? Like you want to be the source of fantastic deals. If an investor wants to make money in the Carolinas, you want them to go, I need to speak to Matt. Yeah, because the coolest part about this industry, great deals, money follows. It's not hard to sell a good deal. It's really difficult to sell a bad deal. And like I said, don't overthink, like, I wouldn't spend much time doing almost anything else. Don't, like all these people are worrying about systems and processes and all these things of like this CRM, that CRM and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, how much properties do you have off market right now? And how many calls do you making to generate? Like, it's like, fix that, right? Get that to a place where it's humming. Because you could have a terrible CRM, or if not no CRM. And if you're pounding phones and generating deals, you can still make several $100,000 a year if you had a decent amount of deals you come across and a decent buyer list. No
That's
CRM,
all it takes, honestly.
no fancy nothing, right? No crazy software. Yeah. That's it. In Reonomy and Mojo for the dialer, what else do you need besides your cell phone? Now, if you want to scale past several $100,000 a year, you got to build an actual business. You build out some systems, some processes, hire an assistant. You can probably, and then that's where you can start scaling from, a six-figure, multi-six-figure to 7+, right? But let's get you to, let's get you to step one. Let's get you walking before we start sprinting.